Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the fourth episode of Free State Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Konkoski. Tonight, I have a great guest, a good friend, Scott Spaulding. He has been talking about and advocating for Defend the Guard in Maryland for a couple years now, I think. But I don't want to misspeak, so I'm going to let him talk on that. I have a couple things I want to talk about really quick. The first one is Wilbur. Do you remember Wilbur from the second episode? He was the rooter that accrued $5,000 in fines in Baltimore County. Well, the neighbor who was complaining about Wilbur dropped the $5,000 fine. So the good boy Wilbur has been vindicated of all wrongdoings and is free to be his roostery self. So a bit of good news in these trying times. Another thing that I really just want to touch on again is SB1. SB1 is pretty much the state's way of getting us to not conceal carry in any public gathering. It's 100 yards within any county or state building, and anywhere, any private property, you don't have explicit permission to carry the weapon. So the 16th is the hearing for that, and we're going to talk about the sign-up process and everything. So pay attention to that. If that's something that you want to speak on, definitely do so and sign up for it. And like I said, we're going to go through the process here tonight about how to sign up to speak on these bills. So without further ado, let me bring in my friend Scott Spaulding, who is also the chair of the Baltimore City Libertarians. What's going on, Scott?
Hey, how you doing, Brian?
Pretty good. All right, so we're just going to get right into this thing. First, give us some of your background. I know you were a veteran who served overseas, so give us some of your background, some of your experiences overseas, and kind of what has led you to be such a large advocate for Defend the Guard in Maryland.
So I'm really excited to talk about it. I joined the Marine Corps. I grew up in Riva near Annapolis, and I was obsessed with the Navy from the time I was a little kid, obsessed with the Naval Academy. Somewhere around high school, settled on becoming a Marine, and joined the Marine Corps Reserves right out of high school. And my unit was the 4th Civil Affairs Group in D.C., and we deployed to Iraq in 2004 and again in 2006 and then 2009 to Afghanistan and 2012 to Afghanistan. So over the course of those deployments, I started to kind of slowly emerge from, I kind of grew up in a very constitutionalist, conservative family, and then slowly kind of get opened up to some aspects of libertarianism. And then by around 2014, I kind of came to realize, listening to a variety of podcasts, but in particular Tom Woods, when his podcast just came out, and listening to Anatomy of the State, it all kind of came together, and I realized that I needed to get move on from that, and that these wars really were. It was one of the last things that really it took to turn me to a libertarian. That all of the things we were doing there were not right, and things didn't even feel right from very early on. But there was just always a rationalization. There was always the sunk cost fallacy. We broke it, and we got to fix it before we can leave. It was eventually it was a mistake to get there, to go there, but and then I realized, no, they've been, what was it? Was it 2018, the Afghanistan papers? They knew all along and were lying about, and we're never going to succeed there. It was always going to be ugly. It was always going to be a mess. And they knew from the beginning it was always going to be a mess. But, they just pass the buck every 2 years to their neck, or, every year to the general or command that replaced them. And, and we ended up 20 years sitting in Iraq, and 11 year or 11 years now in Syria, and I think 19 years in Somalia. These, aside from Afghanistan, these are still going on. We've been in Iraq since 2003, never left. And then we're in Syria now. I'm pretty certain it's 11 years that we just haven't left Syria now. Ali, all over Africa. And so, yeah, I kind of realized that we need to wind down these wars, and that Congress is completely abrogated their duty to the troops, honestly, but in general, they've completely neglected they've neglected their responsibility to control whether the US is at peace or war. They handed that off with the authorization of use of military force and said, well, the president can do what he pleases. Rather than directing the president, we will be at war through a declaration of war. They've said in an AUM, we would call an AUMF, the authorization of use of military force. They've said, well, if the president wants a war, he can have it. And the difference between those two things has allowed the president, we had a problem in the past. It was recognized by the founders that the executive is always interested in war. They're always going to get people involved in wars and start things that will snowball into these excuses to spend money and direct our attention outside of domestic affairs. The founders realized that, and they said that they wanted the Congress to declare war for a reason. And with Vietnam, they realized that they wanted to try to tighten the leash by passing the War Powers Act and saying that the president can only do that, but for 90 days. And they kicked up this scheme of the AUMF where, well, we'll give him permission to do things. But even that has turned into what Barbara Lee predicted, which is this total blank check for war that goes on forever. And now we have, by how poorly written that AUMF, a situation where the president can just send troops to war anywhere he pleases at any time. I believe it's been as many as 17 countries, from the Philippines all the way across Africa, and the war on terror, totally unchecked, and often in secret. There was a great episode in a book that's released. I can't get you the woman's name right now, but it was on Scott Horton's show, where he just recently spoke to a woman who kind of documented how the president in secret can now completely in secret initiate conflict in some places, and completely unbeknownst to congressmen themselves. Even some of the worst war hawks have no idea where sending troops to conflict. And the craziest part of it to a lot of people is that this includes the National Guard. Just last year on January 23rd, a National Guard member from Mississippi was injured by a mortar in Mali. And it was a sister company to the National Guard unit right here in same battalion, just different company of a National Guard unit right here in Maryland. And the National Guard from Ohio is defending the air base in Syria we have right now. And this time last year, it was the Montana National Guard, and they were in a 9-day long battle. No one from the U.S. was injured in that case, but 9 days of continuous fighting, most by National Guard members. The Department of Defense likes this situation because they can rely on the National Guard to call them as they please into conflicts wherever, and they don't have to. It doesn't cost as much, and it achieves their goal of what they call total force integration, where every unit, a Guards unit, an active duty unit, is considered interchangeable to them. But they're not interchangeable. They're different, and there's a reason they're different. The National Guard is the state's organized militia, and it's meant to be here. And part of the appeal, why they have an easier time recruiting people for the National Guard, why Maryland gives extra benefits to Guard members that don't happen for active duty military members, like educational benefits, is that the Guard is here to serve Maryland first. They are here to, be the ones that respond to disasters and snowstorms and things of that nature. But they can't do that if they're overseas. And the president has had a free hand to call up any unit that he pleases. And this is an attempt to try to restrain that, to put it in check. Because the difference for Maryland is not only when you call up a Guard unit, are you taking our Guard out of the state, but you're also taking first respond Guard members have a day job. Unlike an active duty member whose only job is training to fight or do whatever their job is on the active duty military side, a Guard member has their weekend job with the National Guard, and they have a day job, teaching, being a policeman. They're disproportionately represented in what they call the essential jobs, which is a term I don't really love, but your first responder type jobs. A lot of police and paramedics are also Guard members. And so when you send a Guard unit, if a Maryland unit gets called up to go, as they have recently, to Kuwait or to Saudi Arabia to defend the oil fields, right? And then that unit is not only is that unit not in Maryland anymore to serve Maryland, but that person is not in their day job. And due to different regulations, one specifically called USERA, that job has to be held vacant for that Guard member to return. So that's an economic cost to the state every time we send a Guard member out of the state. And to businesses, it's more difficult for a business to continue to survive and thrive. And in some cases, there are members of the Guard that are sole proprietors of businesses. A friend of mine, I don't want to spare details, but essentially he had to shut down his business and sell it off when he was mobilized, and then pick it up again later. So
when did when did this really kind of start? Like, when did National Guard members start being sent to what most people would think would be reserved for active duty military sort of operations and missions? Like, how long has this been going on?
Well, it's funny, my father-in-law joined the Guard during Vietnam as a dodge from going to Vietnam. In the past, the Guard was separate. It was held more separately, and essentially post Vietnam, they recognized that there was a crazy situation where you had people, let's say, bribing or controlling or pulling connections, like how George Bush was in the Air Guard. That was a dodge because he could get away with joining, but knew that he wouldn't go to Vietnam because they didn't send the Guard back then. But the Department of Defense realized that wasn't a good. It looked ridiculous to have people joining the military to avoid the conflict, and they passed the Montgomery Act in the 80s that called for this total force integration, where they're trying to get the Guard more involved in regular active duty situations. But it really, and so that meant sending them abroad more for training in the 80s, and some governors in the 80s pushed back on this, specifically Ohio and some of the other blue wall states, when Reagan sent some Guard units to Honduras to provide logistical support, mainly building roads for the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, or the Contras who were fighting in the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. So they were sending Guard units from Ohio to build roads so that stuff could get to the conflict zone. Some governors pushed back and said, we don't want to release our Guard for that. It's ended up in a little bit of a conflict. There was a Supreme Court case about it that said, no, governors can't do that on their own, and that the Montgomery Act does allow it. The finding of the Supreme Court was the Montgomery Act allows troops to be sent anywhere for training purposes, which this was. So even though they're being sent to Nicaragua and they're sort of helping out with the conflict, they're not in the country in conflict, and they're training. They're getting learned their training value, right? That was the Supreme Court's finding around 1992. And they laid off. They didn't really rely on the Guard for the Gulf War. It wasn't until 9/11 when they relied heavily on the Guard. I mean, there was a point during the Iraq War in 2006, 7, 8 during the surge where half of all the troops in Iraq were Guard members. And pretty regular, it was about 18% of all the people injured were Guard members. But basically, this is this is the global war. This is a result of the global war on terror. That we're going to now use the Guard as much as possible because it's a backdoor. When there was a period of time where they put a study in whether we should conduct a draft because they had already lowered the standards. They were having lots of disciplinary problems. It's where we got these troops that were that ended up having embarrassing situations like the murders in Mahmoudiya and Bradley Manning would not have been able to enlist had the standards not been changed. So another thing they did was start leaning on the Guard more because they weren't lowering the well, they did lower the standard for everyone, but they already had Guard members, so they decided we're going to lean on them more. We need to use them more and keep them in the rotation constantly. So this is all really a result. It was something the DoD wanted to push towards, but it never would have happened in the scope that it has until these 9/11 wars. And now it's ongoing. It's a regular fact of life that Guard units from Ohio are in Syria, and Virginia Guard members are running the base in Djibouti, both of which are considered to be combat zones by the Department of Defense. And there is a real risk, and they are actively involved in combat there. So that's when it's been ongoing for the last 20 years, but it didn't wind down as these wars, they fall out of mind. Well, we're out of Afghanistan. All these wars are over. But as far as the DoD is concerned, they're not. We're still fighting. We're still, soldiers wasn't Guard members, but troops got killed last year in Kenya. Hardly anyone heard about it, but the drone base that they were operating out of Kenya got raided and troops were killed there because they want this free hand to put bases all over the planet without people knowing and drop drones wherever they drop missiles from drones anytime they please. And there are Guard drone units, none in Maryland, but this. So that's all to say. The goal, what some bright folks first to the 10th, actually, to give credit where it's due, there are groups that during the Gulf War in 1991 came up with a very similar idea and cooked up similar legislation. And they're very proud of that. There's folks right here in Baltimore, the Peace Action Network is what they're called. And and some of the Vets for Peace members in Baltimore tried to do a similar law in the 1990s, but it kind of became a moot point because the Gulf War ended. And theirs was different. It was the idea was only if the UN has authorized the war, not a declaration of war from the United States, but instead a UN declaration, as I understand it. But credit's where they do. So they're very proud. Every time I talk to them about this, they're like, hey, we did something like this before. So they're on board. Actually, I've sat down and talked with them. They had a vote. They support this. And they're about as far left as you could possibly imagine being. This is not a partisan idea. But let's describe the idea. I kind of got ahead of myself. So around probably 2015, the 10th Amendment Center sort of saw this idea or kind of cooked up this idea on their own. And, independent, great ideas could pop up in more than one places. So you had the Vets for Peace people and Peace Action think of it in the 90s. And then you have 10th Amendment Center think of it more recently. And then Pat McGeehan, a delegate from West Virginia, was the first person to write it out as a law and introduce it in West Virginia. He was working in West Virginia, and that's the first time I kind of heard about it. And then around 2018, a group called Bring Our Troops Home got organized, which is a veterans group led by a fellow named Dan McKnight out of Idaho. and they held a rally in DC, brought in some legislators from Hawaii, Andy Clifford from Wyoming, Tyler Lindholm, a bunch of delegates from all over the country who had learned of this bill and supported it. And they had a little panel. And that's where I learned about the idea. And it's the first thing that got me off the political couch and onto the ball field. I mean, the first libertarian meetup I went to was just because, well, I know libertarians will support this. I'm going to a meeting because I need to spread the gospel of defend the guard. So the idea is very simple. And it seems so obviously correct that I really thought when I first learned about that, all I would have to do is hand it to a state delegate and they would thank me like I had just given them manna from heaven, and this would sail right through in 2018, no problem. The idea of the bill is essentially that if a state passes this law, their guard will be restricted from participating in combat overseas. So Maryland's guard will no longer be available for rotations to Syria unless Congress declares war. It just requires a declaration. It's a pretty small ask, honestly. We're just asking Congress to get their act together and put their names on the line before we go put Maryland's guard gets put in harm's way. This doesn't restrict the guard from doing any of the other things it already does every day. It only says we expect Congress to have done their job first. And an AUMF doesn't count because Congress handed over their decision-making power. It's as if the Supreme Court decided to raise taxes or the president decided to declare a law unconstitutional. Right? That's the same as Congress with the AOMF. They said the president can decide to do what he wants. So exactly, just follow the Constitution. It's pretty obvious, right? So we're just asking that Maryland state legislature pass this bill. It stipulates that Maryland's guard won't participate in any conflicts unless Congress declares war. It's a pretty simple, obvious ask, and that's why I think it's a no-brainer. And actually, our first year, my first year learning about it, 2018, I handed the bill off. I didn't know anything about lobbying or getting a bill passed. I mean, I'd seen I'm Just a Bill on in Schoolhouse Rock was about my level of knowledge,
Right.
And I really thought all I had to do was call my delegate and it would just go right through. But the thing is, state delegates don't think about these things that much. Foreign policy isn't front of mind for them, even though we know that foreign policy is domestic policy, that all the trillions of dollars we spend overseas come back home or dollars taken from us that hurt our economy. And not only that, but foreign policy is domestic policy in the sense that every wave of police militarization, starting from World War I with getting police into military-style uniforms, and on through World War II and Vietnam, where the ideas of SWAT teams came to the United States, on to more recently police militarization like we see now with, at Vietnam, we got police helicopters, were all birthed of that. And then here we are in 2000s with MRAPs in every police station and police looking more like SWAT, every cop looking like SWAT team kitted out for bear. All of that's a result of, there's a great paper by Emily Watson, who did her research in Baltimore. She worked for the Brown Costs of War Project and realized that all of our police militarization problems can be rooted back to the post 9/11 wars and getting people out of the military and into police uniforms. So that's all to say. State delegates don't think about these things that much, and that's where it's been a project for me to learn that I need to how to talk to them and how to get their attention and sit down and talk to them and teach them that, yeah, they should care about this bill. It's not only that they should care about the Constitution, we all agree about that, but that there's other reasons for them to think that, and for what it's worth, for those that are concerned about if they're concerned about the climate, there's nothing all that great, whether you're concerned about it or not, there's nothing all that great about burning about sometimes as much as a quarter of all the kerosene in the United States, flying jets back and forth between here and the Middle East every day. There's nothing. If nothing else, it's just wasteful.
Right.
And so if you got a delegate that's concerned about that, well, flying our A-10s, that Maryland's Guards A-10s, all the way over to Afghanistan and back burns a hell of a lot of carbon dioxide. That's what you care about.
Right.
So that's all to say that I learned about this bill. I think it's very simple. It's very clean. It's very direct. It doesn't it doesn't cause other problems for the state. It's just now it's about sitting down and talking to them. I had a good deal of success with it. I've been trying to get other groups to know about it so they can help out. But also I've had a good deal of success. I've talked to about half the delegates in the committee now. No one has anything bad to say about it. But at first it was me learning. My first year, I just was tweeting at them. In my second year, I thought I took my eye off the ball a little bit. I was busy getting married and some other thing, going through life. But I was kind of last minute calling them and hey, vote for this, and not really getting a hold of them. And this year, I've managed to get a good number of the committee members to sit down, give me 10, 15 minutes to give my pitch and why this is a great thing. And they seem to be the first year in the committee hearing it got introduced last year. It kind of was it's odd because we don't have a military affairs committee. The closest they could fit this in committee-wise was the Health and Government Operations Committee, with a heavy emphasis on health. It fits because it's government operations, but basically, we were in a hearing where everything was about insurance policies, refunds for ambulances, and then out of left field comes a group of veterans saying, we need you to pass this bill to get Maryland's Guard out of wars. And all the delegates had never heard of it. All but one of the delegates had never heard of this before. They never read my emails or listened to my voicemails. Or their aides didn't pass the message along. So all of them just kind of got a deer in the headlight look, nodded and then moved along. Also, it was their first year back in session. Everything was being done by Zoom. So they really just didn't know what was happening, And this year, I've laid a good amount of groundwork. There's a former Guard member who he was West Virginia Guard, but he's on that committee. We sat down for a good hour and a half, and I think he's on board. They're always very tentative. They want to, as I understand it, the committees here really want to work by consensus. They want to hear it out, sit down, have a closed door meeting, and then when enough of them are thumbs up, then it's going to sail, is what I've heard. So they're not going to give you a yes in public or, we love this, let's go necessarily. It's kind of, let's see if 10 other members of the committee this seems okay. And then they're just like, all right, well, that's enough. That's a majority. Let's go. Let's get it out of here. Let's pass it. So I've laid a good amount of groundwork, but I could always use some help getting a hold of some of the committee members. And I've got a great list of them that I can share with anyone with their phone numbers and emails, but just a Google sheet. But there's also their websites readily available. It's the Health and Government Operations Committee. I don't know if you want to pull that up and just give folks a look.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Give me 1 second. Still figuring out all this fun stuff. Here we go. Share screen. It is right here. There we go. So there you go. You should be able to see it on your screen now.
Yeah, so if you go to the membership list, that tab, right above where it says share.
Yep.
Yeah, so right there are all the members. The best thing you can do if anyone's on board with this or hearing about it is contact your delegate from your district, or one or two of them are veterans, like Stephen Johnson is on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and just give them an email. Their aides have been very responsive by email, saying you'd like to talk to them about it and tell them why they think they're for it. They've all been pretty receptive right now. They're not too swamped just yet in their hearings. And And then from there, the hearing is on February 15th. We've got a date. It's been introduced by Robin Grammer. The rules for the hearing that I've read are they can have as many as 50 people in person to speak on the bill, which is a lot. You'll be limited to 2 minutes to speak in favor of it. And that hearing is on February 15th at 1 p.m. So if you are able to come, that's better. And then they'll take a limited number, kind of based off time, of Zoom people who want to support, because they recognize that having people Zoom in from Western or Eastern Shore is just more fair, that it's hard for some folks to come. So if you wanted either one of those things, if you're able to support this, like I said, number one, contact your delegate and give them a nudge that you're in favor. Let them know that the more people can just let them know that you're paying attention to this bill and support it, the better. Number two, if you can sign up to speak for the bill on the first or submit written testimony. If you can't show up in person or come via Zoom, submit written testimony. Then the hearing will be at 1:15. And and I see the link is in there how to register. To participate, you need to register to participate to speak. You can't just show up the day of. You've got to register the Monday prior if you want to speak in person during business hours. So 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. You've got to sign up and say I want to speak in person, and you can submit your written testimony then. Or, this is the annoying part, if you're going to participate by Zoom, it's the Tuesday prior to the hearing. So it's the 13th if you want to be in person or submit written, and the 14th if you want to join via Zoom. And then the hearing will be at 1 o'clock. And the more people, the better. Like, if we can get a stack of papers of people that have written submissions, saying they look at that, they don't really read them, but they'll look at that pile and say, here, there's 100 favorables right here, all the better. You don't have to say much except I'm in favor of Bill HB 0220 on the top in bold, and give them your address. Other than that, it doesn't have to say much. They're just looking for a stack of things that say they're favorable, because that's going to weigh in on our side. And the more people that can show up in person and say they want to support this bill, the better. I mean, if there's anyone that's a veteran or a current Guard member listening, even more better, because that's what they want to hear from the most. Delegate Grammer specifically would love to hear from some other Guard members supporting it. So yeah, man, I don't know if you could tell, but this is like my I just talked for a half hour straight and didn't let you get a breath in. So I'm sorry.
No, this is there's a reason I wanted you on, because this is, I mean, people, if anybody who knows me, they know how passionate I am about it. It sounds so silly, you talking about such a heavy subject, and then I'll go off for 15 minutes about freaking chickens. But this is what we need. We need people that are passionate about one thing and put their effort into one thing, because if you do that and then you get more people fired up about what you're passionate about, and then they're passionate about it, and that's how you start a movement. That's how you actually get things to change. If you're dabbling in one thing, two things, five things, you can't really put your focus into a single thing. But by doing this and obviously showing your passion about this subject, I'm all fired up. And we've talked before, and I was just looking at the membership list, and I actually have two people in my district in the House that are on the committee. So Travis Laurel, he's actually ran against these people. So there's people in our district that Pasadena is a pretty small area. Mm-hmm. So if you either call them out one time, they're going to remember your name. Like I called out Kipke years ago. And he's never forgotten me, because we're a small district. So hopefully I didn't piss him off too much that maybe he'll listen to me or at least recognize, what I'm saying. But this is exactly what we need, not just in the libertarian movement, not just in the liberty movement,
Mm.
but anybody that wants to incite change in their community or in the state is people that are super passionate about a very specific subject, because without people like you, then these things just keep getting pushed off, keep getting pushed off, and keep getting pushed off to the point where we have, our neighbors, and we don't even realize it, that our neighbors are getting sent off to foreign wars when we just think they're in the National Guard, doing, 1 weekend a month, going down there and doing, PT and a couple drills.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, luckily, like the Air Guard unit hasn't gone anywhere recently, but they were slated to go to Afghanistan about 2 years ago, right before COVID hit, when Trump wound down the presence of Afghanistan, but they were slated to go. Um, and there's constantly small parties going to and from mostly Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. But yeah. um the other thing, just for what it's worth, is the other cool part, at least for me, is there are other things I'm passionate about. I mean, this is definitely my motivating thing, but I'm learning the skills a little bit of, how to get their attention in an email, how to get them to respond, how to set up, when to try to set them up for a meeting, like, that sweet spot right between November and Christmas where they've gotten elected and they're sitting on their laurels, but the session hasn't started yet. That's whatever the bill is, whether it's SB1 or whatever. If you want to advocate, first you got to get a meeting with them, or just make sure they know your name, like you said. They've seen your face and you've shaken their hand sometime between election, like when they've won their election, and Christmas, because that's when they're sitting there thinking, what am I going to do before the session starts? And then the session kicks off, and they've got a million things coming at them. Every day is a committee hearing and all that. And so you've got to learn. I'm learning how to get sweet talk their aides a little bit, find out their times they're available. When can I tell? I mean, next Friday I'm taking the day off work and I'm going down, and I've got 5 different delegates that I'm going to be trying to sit down and talk to throughout the day, just to make sure that they're prep. They know they're prepped for the bill, and all their questions are answered, and hopefully one or two of them. There's only, I mean, I think this is a safe place to talk about it. There's only 1 or 2 negatives of this bill that anyone can come up with. And I've listened to every hearing on it that I can get my hands on, the recent one in Wyoming and New Hampshire. The opposition is getting a little bit more organized, to be fair. They've done their research a little bit, and they're coming up. They're giving hard numbers, big scary numbers to delegates now, telling them that they may risk losing funding. But at least 1 or 2 of the folks I've talked to, I told them, look, somebody's going to come and tell you that you might lose federal funding for this or that. Well, they're not a congressman. That person is trying to scare you with a big number. They don't write law. They don't decide how much money goes to the state's guard. Congress does. And Congress, it could be the case. You might believe this, but if Congress would rather have no guard than do their job, fulfill their duty to the guard, then we need to know that too. You know what I mean? If Congress really would cut funding to the guard, which I don't see happening, what are they going to reduce? Every year they take what the president asks for and increase it. Every year Congress offers more money than the president asks for the military. So I don't see them really cutting the guard, but trying to prep the delegates to push back on that and be like, sir, are you a congressman? Who are you to speculate that Congress will cut funding? When our fiscal note says, the state's fiscal note says there's no effect. So who are you to say that? But all that's really just to say that this is what I care most about. But especially when my bandwidth opens up, when Defend the Guard moves on, that next bill, that next cause we care about, SB1 or whatever, I'll have known those people, or at least worked with them a little bit. They'll know my name, and I'll be able to try to talk them on the next bill. And I'll know the times to try to reach them, and get them on Monday morning for this. And where to find their office and whatnot. So learning that process and the little bit of citizen lobbying or whatever you want to call it, I'm doing, and the stupid stuff. It just about telling people, that they've got to sign up and how to submit a written testimony. And I made a little tutorial last year. Hey, here's the link. Do this. Click here with a little circle on the picture. Put that little icon in the corner that says My GA. That's where it is. So I've got that all together now. So whether it's for SB1 or for or HB 0220, I could talk people through how do I sign up to speak for or against this bill to make it a little easier. Not that it's rocket science, but the easier we can make it for other people to do it, the more we can show, where we stand, the more easily we can all show where we stand, because they don't make it easy on purpose. They want to make it a little bit hard to just show up and tell your delegates what you want.
Exactly. So, all right, we're kind of getting to time, but I do. So, as far as your kind of lobbying efforts go, just obviously it's for defend the guard, but what have you found works best? I like a lot other states have lobbying days, days where the Capitol or the House or the Senate building would be open to the public to come and talk to these people, like kind of specifics. Like what days, or you already said the kind of time frame to kind of reach out to these people between Election Day and Christmas. But what have you found in success when it comes to actually getting a good conversation with these people and actually having their ear and at least them seeming like they're taking it seriously?
Yeah. So, like I said, I think I really tried to be. My first 2 years, I was more. Well, my first year, like I said, I'm learning, so I'm far from the expert. My first year, I really thought I just had to tweet and email the bill at them, and they would see the obvious genius of it and go. But that kind of just the tweets looked aggressive, and so tweeting. I had a little conference with the delegates that supported it, like a Zoom meeting, and before the last year. And I kind of I talked to a few delegates who had supported it, and they said, "Oh no, don't tweet at us. That's they don't want to be put on the spot in public.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They don't want to be asked, appointed, yes or no. They want to have some time to think about it. And it's frustrating. I'll be honest. I really, really wish that I could say delegate so and so supports this, or whatever. But it seems more like what has worked for me, be disarming. Empathize with them that they're really busy at this time. Hey, congratulations on just getting elected. Glad you got reelected, or whatever the case may be. I hope you have a minute to consider this as you're planning for your upcoming session. Just that, I think I have no idea what it's like to be you or have done that, but I could pretend I could kind of say I think I know where your head might be. Seemed to have helped a lot this year for me. And then saying, hey, is there a chance we could sit down? You got to work from if you're not a constituent or you're not a veteran and you're speaking to a veterans caucus member, you have to have your reason. Why should I talk to this person? What's they're just gonna bump you down the list. If you're not a constituent and you don't have some clearly relevant reason to be connected to this bill and them, then they might, you're gonna end up lower on their priority list. But honestly, I've had most of the delegates I've had I did say I'm a veteran and I'm concerned about this bill, so that could be, but most of them, if I said, hey, I just want to sit down and meet with you for 10 minutes over coffee, can we talk for a few minutes? I'll buy, I never said I'll buy you a cup of coffee, but can we grab a cup of coffee? That was 5 or 6 delegates that said yes to that. I'll talk to you for 10 minutes if you meet me meet me at my office, or meet me at a Dunkin' Donuts, or meet me where, in my district, I'll come up to Parkville and meet you for a Dunkin' Donuts. So, that worked pretty well in that interim season. And then now as the bill, I think the rest of them, honestly, I got a lot of contacts in the last week or two since it got, since I could point to the actual legislation. That it's actually introduced. Here's this bill that's been introduced. I'd like to talk to you about it. can I have 10 minutes of your time? Like asking them for a very small chunk of their time. And then, I mean, let's be honest, I can't say anything in 10 minutes. So, um, so I'll be taking 15 or 20 before they push me out the door. But thus far, it's just kind of being non-threatening and not saying even my position. I'd like to talk to you about this thing for 10 minutes, please. And I'm your constituent, or I'm a person affected by this bill in this way. With those two things have gotten me in the door, and then talking to them, I just, I do a little bit of homework, seeing like what issue they might care the most about. So if I was talking to somebody who their entire page says climate, then I'm gonna slip in that thing about burning lots of jet fuel isn't so great for the environment. But if it's somebody that's Constitution, well, I can talk that language all day long. So that's kind of the main thing, is doing a little bit of just empathizing with them and where they are right now. All my emails start with, I'm glad you've taken time to me in this stressful. I hope the first 2 weeks of session are going well. I don't know if that's what's getting me in the door, but it seems to be. So yeah, those are the things I have learned, is just kind of pointing to the bill and giving your reason and a little bit of empathy to whatever they're experiencing seems to be enough thus far to get me probably a sit down with the majority of the members in that committee.
So according to the legislation bill, the tracker on the Maryland General Assembly website, it's saying Delegate Grammer is sponsoring the bill. It's House hearing on the 15th, 1 p.m. So were you kind of the driving force in getting Grammer to sponsor this bill? Was it already kind of on his radar? How did he become the sponsor of this bill?
I might have to step out in a minute here. I think I am getting a call from a delegate here.
Oh, cool.
Actually, Bring Our Troops Home reached to him, but I'm terribly sorry.
No, you're fine. This is what it's about. You're going to do the thing that we're just talking about.
Let me pop out, and I'll check back with you in a minute, okay?
All right, good, cool. And that's what it is. That's what it is when you are involved in your local politics, to where it's 8:50 at night on a Tuesday, and you're taking a call from a delegate. And Scott has been probably the driving force behind Defend the Guard in Maryland. You could see how passionate he was about this issue. And that's what we need. We need people to find something that they're passionate about and, focus on it with, almost a level of autism, to where you're almost obsessing over it. Right? I mean, 8:50 at night on a Tuesday. A lot of people are getting ready for bed, or, they're watching their Netflix show or something like that. That's, it's important, but when you get involved in this level of politics, where you are a constituent who is pushing a bill, or advocating for a bill, or lobbying, state delegates and state senators, this is the kind of thing that you're getting into. This isn't something for everybody. It's definitely not. But if you really want change, this is the kind of work that you have to put in. You're going to miss, you're going to miss family time sometimes. You're going to miss kids' sports games or shows or concerts, plays. You're going to have to step out from, doing a podcast, or even better, step out from watching, your show with your wife or something like that. But this is the kind of things the kind of people that we need in order to incite change. And you're seeing that it's not just a immediate effect, right? This isn't the kind of what they like to call the millennial effect of instant gratification. Scott has not only served in the military and served overseas for a long time before he got to this point, but he's been working on just the legislation aspect of it, trying to get delegates and senators to introduce these bills to the floor. This isn't. You can go local to the county level with these things too. You all know how passionate I am about chicken laws. It's talking about something as heavy as defend the guard and comparing it to backyard chicken laws. It sounds silly, but it's the same. It's the same mentality that you have to have. Somebody has to, a constituent, a resident has to take point in these issues. Somebody has to be the ringleader. Somebody has to herd the cats. And more times than not, especially if you're a libertarian, you're going to be working and trying to convince people who are not libertarians to agree with you to get this bill onto the floor. So it was almost poetic that he got a call from a delegate in the middle of us talking about this, because this is what it takes. So I'm going to give him a few more minutes. Wasn't prepared for a gap here. I just want to make sure that he says everything that he wants to say. So let's look at this form real quick. Let me bring up the tab again, the link. Here we go. And I'm going to share it. So this is the tracking account. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to create an account. That's the very first thing before you can even begin to sign up for to speak on these things. I think I have an account. Let me see if it comes up. I think this might be it. Yeah, here we go. Okay, cool. So once you have an account, you'll be brought up with these tabs here, and then I believe the witness sign up is what you want to sign up for. So I guess when I signed up, I signed up for this last year. So the organization that I would represent is the Libertarian Party of Maryland. So that's automatically filled in. And then it'll bring you up the list of the most recent or the most upcoming testimony periods. So tomorrow we have all of these bills. We have transit, commuter bus service, arbitration reform for state employees, sales and use tax, secondhand apparel. So we have all these testimonies that are coming up tomorrow. Like Scott was saying, I'm pretty sure it's too late to sign up for them if I wanted to sign up for these right now. But this is the form that you're seeing, and you would go through the drop down menus, and then your testimony, you would put in what kind of testimony you're doing. So once you get that signed up, it's relatively clickable, and they actually give you the ability to track bills. Let me see if I can add SB001. Let's see. Maybe not. This is for committees. And this is what I mean. You have to click around with it for a little while. But yeah, so I think I'm gonna put us on hold because I kind of want to hear what Scott talked about with the delegate. So let me see if we can't put a little hold on this thing. And I'll go live again once Scott steps back in. Why not? And what should I put up? What should you guys look at while I'm waiting? Let's put this up. All right, we're back in it.
Yo.
So how'd that go?
I gotta be honest, could have gone better. I kind of, for the first 2 minutes, was out of sorts, and oh, let's say the woman was kind of, I supported ex-presidents' wars, but not Y presidents' wars. So I guess a lesson learned is I need to be more careful about saying this war is, we shouldn't have been, or I need to be more careful about saying whether it's not a referendum on a given war. I didn't mean to. I kind of was just giving an example of, well, we have troops in Syria right now, and Congress never voted on that. And she kind of took that to mean I was, which I am, but this bill isn't. She took it to mean I was speaking against even being in Syria at all. And she was like, well, there were weapons of mass destruction, and Assad is a terrorist and whatever. So I should be more careful to say that the bill is not a referendum on the war. It's just asking, and I didn't intend to say that, but that's the impression she got. So I had to do some backpedaling and get her back to neutral leaning negative from a momentary not so good.
Right. Well, I mean that's it. This is what it's about, and that's what I was saying when you had to drop out for a minute. This is activism right here. This. I mean, you couldn't have gotten this call at a better time when we were talking about it. Like, you know what I mean? So this is what it is. It's a learning experience. We're not, majority of people that are passionate about things. We're not lawyers. We're not legislatures. We're not, elected officials. So this is just like any other kind of job, because essentially is what you're doing is a job. It comes with a learning curve. Yeah. And can you say who it was or no?
I think it's probably best not to.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Just she's a newly elected member. There's only a few of those, and but if anyone's, if anyone reaches her and nudges her, who cares? She's Tavares, I guess, is her name.
Okay.
But the point is, she's allowed to her opinion. I guess the important thing to me is to be more careful, and this kind of comes from the beginning where I don't know that I presented it as a referendum on the wars overall in the past, but that's not. I mean, to us, it might mean that, but this bill is such a small step in a certain direction that there's not. We don't need to give them a reason to object to it. Well, I think it was a good idea that President thus and so supported this action. It's like, well, that's fine, but
this doesn't have really anything to do with that specific. Conflict.
Yeah, exactly. And I should have been, but that's all to say. She, when I kind of explained a little bit more clearly that another thing that I find is I failed to spit out usually a good line to use for anyone is that America, whether, for those that are not anti-war like I might be, or, for those that, if you're talking to someone who's not, one thing that seems to really sing to them is when I say that America is 5 victories for 5 in declared wars. Every declared war we've ever had has lasted less than 4 years and has been a resounding victory. You know what I mean? But but our undeclared wars have a mixed record and tend to drag on much longer. And so for them, that's things like, oh, this is great. Like, yeah, she's in PG. So if anyone wants to I don't know. I wouldn't harass her. She said, I talked back into, I took my foot out of my mouth and seemed to get her back to, well, I'm going to think about it. Let me talk to, and this is another thing I have sort of failed to do. Not entirely. I was being delicate with talking to the, even on the website, the chair of the Veterans Caucus in the House was an acquaintance of mine, and I didn't feel like I should put him in a really awkward position You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe he wasn't a close friend. He was a guy I knew in college that I would hang out with sometimes. You know what I mean? But we were friendly, you know, and so I didn't want to leverage that, and I probably shouldn't have hesitated. But he's not the chair of the Veterans Caucus any longer because he moved on from being a delegate to a councilman.
Okay.
Um, so that's all to say. He would have been my she wants to go to the Veterans Caucus, and I have not. On the Senate side, I reached out to some of the members of the Veterans Caucus, but on the House side, I never really got any good responses, and they haven't updated their membership either. But I got to try to beat her to the punch, getting a hold of him and see if I can get a call in first and get him on our side. Actually, Michael Rogers, anyone listening in District 32, Anne Arundel County, we got to get him on board so that he could turn her back our way.
Oh, I'll reach out to our people in Anne Arundel, see if they can do anything.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I just wanted to hear that was kind of poetic almost that you got that call in the middle of us, talking about this subject.
Yeah.
So I really just kind of wanted to get a follow up, and appreciate you doing that for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for coming on, Scott. I mean, you spoke at the Anne Arundel County meeting a few months ago, and it was awesome. I wish you were our speaker that night, but
well, I wish I could have gotten the guest of honor there to give us a shout on the radio.
Yeah, I'll keep trying with him. He's turned into enough of a friend that we'll text occasionally. So
yeah.
So maybe I can get you on with him. I'll just keep pushing the issue with him.
Yeah, if we could get a chance to at least talk about it
right
on his show, my God, what that would do. Getting a plug from I had to be a butthead about it at not a butthead, but I just kind of had to horn it in at the Dave Smith show up in Perryville. I don't know. I just more or less was like, I have a question. Tell everyone about Defend the Guard. There's a hearing on the 15th. Right. This is the part of the problem. I'm that guy at the end that was like, I have a question. Will you tell everyone this? And Dave Smith was like, yes, I will tell them exactly what you just said.
I mean, that's what you got to do. You got to put yourself out there. I mean, this is activism.
It's my one shot to tell 300 people that there's a hearing about a bill that if they like Dave Smith, they might like this.
Right, exactly, absolutely. And even if people out of state, comment on these things or put in some sort of email or phone call, that adds up. And like you were saying, it's almost having that stack. They don't look at the entire stack. They don't look if you're a constituent, but they have a stack of emails or something that might be enough to persuade them that there's a lot of people that are supporting this issue.
Yeah, exactly.
So I appreciate you coming on. Every episode since I've started, I've been giving Rage Against the War Machine rally a shout out. Do you plan on going?
Oh yeah, I'll be there.
Cool, awesome. So everybody check out Rage Against the War Machine. I'll put the link in the show notes, and it's in all the previous show notes. We're starting to get pushback on it, right? I don't know if you've been following, but you have we're getting some not quite mainstream media, but some bigger publications talking about it, some neutrally, some positively, some negatively. We're getting, other libertarians or former libertarians talking negatively about it because of some of the speakers, but that means that it's starting to get the reach out there. That's a good thing. Bad press is better than no press in this instance.
When you're taking flack, you're over the target.
Yep, there you go. So
that's the biggest thing that convinces me that this bill could actually work, because I've had some questions about, well, would the Supreme Court just shoot it down? But the fact that they have to dedicate a 2-star general to opposing it and keeping tabs on it and crafting talking points for their hearings tells you that they're worried about it. You know, the fact they even have to push back tells you that it actually could do what we want it to do. That it's not
Yep.
a toothless, you know, move.
Exactly. It was the same thing when I was running for state senate. I had one news article. I think it was the Capital Gazette. It was an opinion piece about a forum that I spoke at, and the writer only said negative things about me, and they weren't bad things. They were just negative things in her opinion. So that's when I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm not doing as bad as I thought. So any press is better than no press. I'm looking forward to that rally. It's a couple weeks now.
Yeah, it's getting close. It sneaks up on you February.
I know we were talking about it back in November or something like that, and here it is. It's a couple weeks away. So on that note, Scott, I look forward to seeing you there. I don't know if I'll see you before then. If not, I'll definitely see you there. It should be a good time. Everybody should come if you're able to. If you're in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, I think even Virginia, maybe even North Carolina and Ohio. I think we're trying to get as many buses to get as many people there as possible that you don't have to drive. I know we have 2 different hotels that we're blocking out so that if you want to stay the night, because there's after events that are planned after Sunday and stuff like that. So definitely check out the Rage Against the War Machine rally. If you can't make it, please donate, because we have all these speakers and we got to set up a stage, and they're making us get porta potties and recycling bins and trash cans and all this expensive stuff just to practice our First Amendment rights. So Scott, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I don't know. I wish I would have had you on sooner. You're, as far as
it's up so fast.
People, when people in the Libertarian Party of Maryland, I feel like a lot of the time we're so spread thin, the majority of us, that we can't have like a singular focal point when it comes to certain issues and legislation. So it's really inspiring to see you do what you've been doing, and not just this year, but for the previous years. And there's lessons to be learned from you in this process that you've been going through with this. So I really appreciate you coming on. I hope a lot of people watch this podcast. I hope a lot of people feel informed and fired up and passionate, even if their passion isn't Defend the Guard, to kind of find their passion in something else.
Yeah, I think just the thing with the passion thing, just the one thing it's allowed me to do is stay out a lot of the squabbles that might be happening in the party, because it's just like, I don't care. Maybe it's not that I don't care or I don't have feelings about some of the squabbles. It's just like, can we, like, for me, I'm so singularly focused, and this goes for other people, those other people that are singularly focused. If we can coalesce around those people, only briefly, it can maybe put some of those squabbles to bed. Because we're just all going to put our nose to the wheel on this for a minute, because whether it's this bill, my bill, or some other bill, let's all drop the knives for a minute, and let's all do this for the next 2 weeks. And then we can go back to squabbling, or maybe by seeing that we're all on the same team, we can kind of put some of
come together. I always like to say, the enemy's out there, right?
Yeah.
We are not each other's enemy. Actually, the first time I met you was at the Rage Against, or what was it called? End the Damn Wars rally.
Damn Wars, yeah.
Yeah, that was the very first time I met you. It took us to both end up at a rally in D.C. to meet each other, and we're both in Maryland. So again, Scott, thanks for coming on. I'll definitely be keeping up with you. Cool. And if you can make it out to an Anne Arundel County meeting, I'd love it. You're always.
Yeah, I'll be there again. I'll be there again.
All right, we try to have fun. Thanks for coming on, Scott.
Have a good night. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Scott Spaulding, probably statewide the largest pusher for the Defend the Guard legislation in the state of Maryland. I shouted him out on Twitter earlier. His Twitter page is Here come loading. It is MD Vet, the number 4, peace. And he's got a crab and a dove and a peace sign, and he's got a blue check. So go give him a follow if you don't already. Every time I talk to Scott, especially in person, he's just a very kind of inspirational, calm, cool-headed guy, and I always look forward to my conversations with him whenever I get that chance, and I'm glad that he came on tonight. With that being said, I have nothing else for you guys. If you didn't catch the live stream or just caught parts of it, I will edit out that about 20-minute window of silence. I just really wanted to hear what Scott had to say, kind of rehashing, but the poeticness of us talking about this and him getting a call from a delegate in the middle of our conversation about that exact thing was really cool, and I'm glad that he felt comfortable to share that with us. So if you're listening later on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Rumble, I think I can edit it for Rumble too, then that little slow segment will be edited out so you don't have to skip it or wait for it. But thank you everybody for watching. Everybody have a good week, have a good weekend coming up. If there's something that you are very passionate about, something that you want brought to light that I may have overlooked or just straight up don't know about it, please reach out to either my personal Twitter, that is BK the number 2 FOR Maryland, or reach out to the podcast Twitter or YouTube, and I'll look into it and I'll bring it to light. And if you're active in that thing that you're passionate about, I'll ask you to come on and talk about it, because this is what this podcast is about. It's about Maryland. It's about Maryland and local issues, and I want to make sure that I keep it that way, because it gets really easy to talk about national issues because everybody else talks about national issues. Even local news stations, even local radio stations end up veering to the national stories because they've already been dealt with, vindicated, commented on multiple times. So it's easy to put that information out there. It's easy thing to talk about, and I like to talk about difficult things. I like to educate myself, and I like to educate others. So if you like the show, make sure you give me a like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter. If YouTube isn't your game, I am on Rumble and Odyssey. I'm working on. It's a separate kind of thing. I'll get there. I promise I'll get there. So Odyssey and Rumble, I will be on there. Rumble, I have the first 2 episodes on. I didn't upload the last episode. I kind of just spaced on that. So please like and subscribe wherever you find me, and I will see you all next week. Thank you.